This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. Thank you for joining us. Today is a very special day, very special episode, a lot of specialness going on here. The guest this week is Brittany Drake, the vocalist and guitarist from the band Pity Sex, who are incredible. More on her in a minute. I want to get this announcement out of the way. So, something I've been working on for quite some time, and I got clued into this website via my good friend Corey, who also does some cool podcasts. If you're a baseball fan, go check out his Ivy Envy podcast. It specifically focuses on the Chicago Cubs, but if you like baseball, you'll enjoy it. So anyways, that plug out of the way. So there's this website. It's called Patreon. Patreon, which is basically a patron, some version of that. So anyways, I've always thought of a way, or I've always been searching for a way to be like, okay, clearly this show takes a lot of time for me and my editor, Tom. There's a lot of time putting this together. And since I don't do this as my full-time profession, sometimes it's hard because I'm like, okay, I'm spending some of my own cash in order to keep this going. And that's fine. I don't care because I was going to do it regardless. But there has to be a creative way in which you, the listener, that are a fan of the show, because I've interacted with a lot of you. A lot of you email me on a regular basis, and we become friendly either on social networks or, like I said, via email. And it's something that's super special to me because there are people that have just blown my mind in regards to what they've shared with me, what they get out of the show, and it's just awesome. And anyways, I didn't want to do a Kickstarter, didn't want to do this whole like, okay, we got 30 days, otherwise the show's going to go away. The show is not going away. No matter what you do from this point on, you will always get a free podcast a week. That's just a reality. But for those of you that feel invested and feel this is worth your time and what I'm coming to you for, money investing in, that's what I'm looking for in order to, for one, help the show sound better. For two, to get my editor and producer, Tom, paid because he puts so much time into this and he works a full-time job. He basically fits us in between like the hours of probably 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And I just am so thankful for him for doing that. So as much as I would like to make this my career, which, you know, if you guys are crazy and decide to start giving a lot of money, then so be it. I'll do this full time. I'll hang out with a bunch of people. I'll fly all over the place. I'll be a journalist. But I don't foresee that happening. But what I do foresee happening is some of you being like, hey, I'll give a few dollars a month to this show. And that's all I'm looking for. So basically, if you visit this page, patreon.com/the letter X, purpose X, which for those of you that pay attention to me online, that is like every single online avatar that I've ever had since the ages of probably about 15. Patreon.com/X purpose X. And what you will be able to do is you will be able to contribute a monthly fee to the show. And what does that mean? It's like, okay, for $2 a month, I'm just going to support the show. I'm going to be like, yo, this is worth this much money, and I want to give this to them, aka me. Keep in mind, I have to pay taxes on this stuff. I'm not like walking away being like, all right, sweet, tax-free money, like awesome. No, this is a legit above-the-board operation. Basically, it's a combination Kickstarter/fund drive. This will have no end date, but what's awesome about it is it does have a lot of cool rewards. So like the biggest reward is like you contribute a large amount of, when I say large, you contribute a decent chunk size of money a month, I'll interview you. That's it. And it'll be awesome. And I'll publish it down the line as an actual episode of the show. And then there's also stickers, there's buttons, there is exclusive newsletters. There's a bunch of fun stuff that I've worked really hard to put together. There's a video on the page, patreon.com/xpurposex, and you will be able to contribute. I'll, of course, publish this on my social network, so if you forget the website, it's totally fine. You can either email me or just look on any social network, and you'll be able to find it. But anyways, that is what I want to do with you guys. I want to help build this thing. I want to be able to make the show sound awesome. I would love to be able to fly to places to interview people, like just stuff that's hard for me to do right now because obviously I just don't have the resources to do it. So there you are. My hat in hand, I'm coming to you being like, hey, if you feel this is worth something, pay something. That's awesome. I would really appreciate it. And even if you don't, that's fine. Let me put it this way. If the amount of people that download this show on a weekly basis decide to give like $1 a month, that will be murdering goals that I have set for this thing. You know, honestly, thousands and thousands of dollars. And it would be like, holy crap, I don't know what to do with all this. But that's not true because I do know what to do with all of this. I'd put it right back into the show because I have a full-time job. Everything's fine from that perspective. All I want to do is make this show better for you. Enough of me rambling. Let's talk about Brittany. So Pity Sex came across my table, desk, whatever you like to call it, a while back just via Run for Cover because they have released an EP and a full length on that label. And it was one of those things where it got described to me like, oh yeah, it's kind of like Joy Division, post-punky, Interpol, like all the stuff that just completely rings my bell. I love all that stuff and I was so excited to check it out. I listened to it and while it didn't live up to those expectations, it was really, really good, especially for a younger band because there are all the members of this band are essentially in their early to mid 20s. And so I immediately just kind of started looking around at the band and seeing what they were doing. And it was cool because the thing that struck me about them is that they don't take themselves seriously as far as their online personas are concerned. They don't try to be, you know, this serious, dark, brooding band. That comes out in their music and their lyrical content. And they also do this band on their own terms. Like, you know, they all go to school. They all have lives outside of the band. And I just find it so cool that you can have these two polar opposite sides of your life that inform one another. Anyways, we talk about that. Brittany was awesome. She was a little nervous, but she killed it. She did such a good job. She told me before we started the interview, she's like, I've never done anything like this before. I'm like, trust me, it'll be okay. So anyways, here's my conversation with Brittany, and I'll talk to you afterwards. Point or introduction to kind of, you know, you and your music and stuff like that, because I mean we have a lot of mutual friends, but we've obviously never met each other, and I don't think we've been in the same room. But anyways, regardless, once your band kind of popped up into my own personal radar, it was one of those things where, I mean, and I know this is a common reaction, and you will probably explain yourself 100,000 times moving forward, but it's like there's no way to say your band's name not awkwardly. Like that's impossible. Like,
yeah,
it even in putting this in my calendar, it was like, Brittany, Pity Sex. Like clearly I have Pity Sex scheduled with you at 1:00 this afternoon. It's like,
yes.
So I'm sure. I mean, obviously I presume the intention is to make it extremely awkward for people to say your band name in any context.
Am I allowed to talk about it right now?
We're recording. We're in it.
We're going.
We're in it.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're in the mix right now. Okay.
Yes.
Actually, the name was already a name before I joined the band. I moved here from Grand Rapids and moved in with the rest of the Pity Sexers. And they had already, I was like a fan. Like, I mean, they were my friends, but I was like, I really like your band, guys.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, we really want to like change things up a little bit and have some female vocals and stuff. So do you want to join? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I didn't really think much of the name because it was already so ingrained in my brain, like as just like a band. But when I told my parents about it, I was kind of like, yeah, so I joined a new band called Pity Sex. And now, I mean, like, now I am used to how people react to it and kind of just say, yeah, they chose the name before I was in the band. But it was actually their friend who is now a model. And he was the one who came up with the name as, I think, like, kind of a joke. And then it just kind of stuck. And now it's worked out beneficially for us, I would say.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely an element of controversy and baggage that immediately goes into the band name. So it's like people will undoubtedly judge your band solely off of the name. They'll be like, oh yeah, oh, I see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But at the same time, at least it inspires that discussion with people being like, yo, what's up with that band? Like, why would they even name themselves that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, you yourself, like walking into it, what's been the most awkward situation that you've obviously had to, I mean, is it the conversation you had with your parents where it's like, yeah, so I'm in this band, or what other random context has been like, ooh, really? That's what you're doing?
My parents, they were just kind of like, whatever, like Brittany's in a band again. I would say in school, it happens a lot. Like I'll like have to take time, or not take time off, but like have to miss a section of a class or something to do something related to the band. And I'll tell my professor, and they're usually just like, oh, cool, what's your band's name? And I either lie or just like come up with something off the top of my head because I just don't want to have that conversation. But there's been a few instances where I have not had anything else to come up, to like lie with, and just told them the band name. And that was just mostly with students, and they usually react actually pretty well. I don't think anybody has like judged me too much based on that.
Sure. I imagine too, because it's like it's a different story if it's in a context like obviously you being female, that's loaded already.
Oh, totally.
And so it's like, a guy to say that is kind of like, there's that sort of like, not saying that the rest of your band members have a macho attitude, but there's that like, oh yeah, we're called Pity Sex, like what of it?
Right.
But you as a female, it's like kind of like, yeah, it's called this.
That's exactly how I say it too. I'm like, we're called Pity Sex.
It's like a question mark at the end.
Yeah, like I don't know if I am allowed to tell you this in public. It's definitely not a comfortable conversation for the most part. And people also, I'm like worried that people won't take it seriously and like, oh, I'm doing this thing, I have to take time off from this. What's your band called? Pity Sex. And then they're like, okay, well, no, you're not going to take time off for that. It just doesn't get taken seriously.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And I don't mean to belabor the point. I just wanted to highlight the fact that you obviously have to, struggle with that and figure out how that relates to the outside world. And you, like you said, just having to kind of step into this and be a part of it with being like, well, I have to figure out how to do this.
It could have been worse. That's just how I've kind of thought about it. Like, it could have been something really offensive or something. It's at least something that people, most of the time, like, we've had to, like, cross borders and stuff, and when they ask us our name, they just laugh, and they're like, all right, go ahead.
That's incredible. It's like you're almost diffusing the situation with humor, that it's like there's that.
Exactly.
Oh. So you mentioned, like you said, you moved to, because you're in Ann Arbor right now, correct?
Yep.
And you moved there from Grand Rapids, you said?
Yep,
and
I lived there before.
You were born in Grand Rapids?
I was born in Lansing, Michigan, but moved to Grand Rapids when I was like 18 or something, I think. So,
but your formative years, you were in Lansing, right?
Yes, near Lansing, Grand Ledge, Michigan. It's like in nowhere.
Okay. And so, cause that is an area that I haven't spent very much time in personally, like that, because Northern Michigan is, not many bands tour through there. I mean, I think it's like the only times I played in Michigan were like Detroit and like Ypsilanti, which was terrifying in and of itself.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, like it's a very rural area, I imagine, that you grew up in.
It was suburban more so than rural. There was like farms and stuff, but there was like definitely kids that lived in what I would consider the city. Granted, it was a really small city, and we were right next to East Lansing, which is Michigan State University. So there was like, I guess, more urban areas around. It wasn't like completely rural. Mm-hmm. I had a backyard though. Like I like hung out in the woods and stuff. So it wasn't like, downtown anywhere. Right.
You strike me, I'm just placing, I wouldn't even call it judgment, but I'm inferring from how you present yourself that you were a very artistically inclined little girl, and you were spending a lot of time out in the woods rather than, hanging out with your Barbies. Not to say there's anything wrong with hanging out with Barbies, because that's your thing.
That's funny because I just never owned a Barbie. I never really wanted one, and that's like what I used to not pride myself on, but I would be like, I was such a tomboy that Barbies were. I also thought that they smelled weird for some reason, and like just really didn't even want to touch them. So you're correct in that aspect. But at the same time, like I said, I was like a tomboy, and I just like wanted to hang out with my brother, who was like 2 years. He's 2 years older than me, and so we just kind of like got along for most of our childhood, and kind of he was like my role model. Like I wanted to be like him,
Mm-hmm.
and he is not artistic whatsoever. So my parents wanted me to be the artistic child because he's actually a genius.
Okay.
So they were kind of like, well, we need to give you something too. Like he's good at this, but you're really artistic. But I actually am not like very good at anything, that is traditionally associated with art.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at crafting, but I'm not good at anything like artistically.
Sure.
So
So you can repurpose things, but maybe
yes.
it's difficult for you to create something completely out of nothing, so to speak.
Yes, I have no depth perception, or like mostly the visual arts. I just don't get it, and I appreciate other people can do it. I just can't do it myself.
Yeah.
But they kind of pushed that on me a little bit, and so I was like, oh, that's not me.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So you said your brother is 2 years older than you?
Yep.
And so did you kind of just basically be, like you said, that sort of tomboy girl trying to, just play the sports your brother was playing and just kind of follow in his footsteps?
Oh, my brother didn't play sports.
Okay. Or be active.
Yeah, we like would. I mean, my brother was straight up he still is a nerd, and like that's what I associated with being a tomboy, kind of.
Oh,
and
interesting. Yeah, because
so,
I immediately connect the tomboyishness with girls that I was in like elementary school with that would play tetherball with me and kind of kick my ass. So like that's what I equate to a tomboy rather. And so that's funny that you look at this sort of nerd archetype and are like, oh yeah, that's like a tomboy.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say I was Sporty Spice. Like whenever we picked, like I was definitely Sporty Spice, but
Okay.
I wasn't good at sports either. So it definitely wasn't my forte, and it wasn't his either.
Got it. So he would, by all definitions of the term, kind of more of an indoor kid, and was playing with his computer, so to speak.
Oh yeah, he loved his computers. He builds them now, and it's crazy. He's always been very much into them, and he was an indoor kid, but we would like I said, we would like hang out in the woods and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to paint the picture where like you are sensitive to the world around you, but not to the point where you were climbing trees and swinging off of ropes into lakes and stuff like that.
Not in the lakes, no. We did have actually a rope swing like thing that we made, and there was a few times that we tried to build forts out there, but we didn't really do anything too dangerous. I think my mom kind of instilled in us that if we did anything even remotely adventurous, that we would just die or something. So we just kind of stuck by the rules.
Sure. Yeah, you kept things safe. And so your family structure was your mom and dad and you and your brother. And what did your parents do for a living as you were growing up?
My mom was an actuary. I don't know, like nobody knows what that is. I still have like a hard time understanding what it is, even though she did that forever. She something to do with risk analysis and insurance. Yeah.
No, I think if I'm not mistaken, an actuary is the person that isn't necessarily like going out in the field and looking at something that happened, but those are the people that are taking the 1 billion scenarios that happens when something goes wrong and putting like some sort of value on it from an insurance standpoint.
Yes.
Okay.
That was basically what she did, but she also did she had spreadsheets for just like she was very much a numbers job.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I really know. And my dad was a computer programmer, but I don't think that he ever did any computer programming at his job. I think that was just his title.
Oh, okay.
He was just like a dude at another insurance company, so that's all he did.
So yeah, you were surrounded by people who were very analytical and very deliberate about what they were doing.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. I think my dad is not so much. He hated his job, so I wouldn't really associate him too much with that. He is he is in some respects a lot. My brother and mom, definitely. I would say that 100% describes them.
Being in that kind of environment, and like you said, your parents were trying to foster the sort of, they wanted to encourage you to fill a role that you didn't particularly identify with. Was that difficult for you, kind of like trying to navigate those waters to be like, well, I don't identify with this, but I don't necessarily know where I want to kind of point myself towards?
Absolutely. Something that like I've talked to them about, so it's not like coming out of nowhere or anything. And I was able, like, I think it's kind of something that not most people, a lot of people don't really consider how their parents might have like tried to shape them as they were growing up. But I was always kind of just trying to figure out what was going on.
If that was difficult for you to obviously try to, because especially if at an early age, if they are kind of setting you on a path and you don't identify with that path. So I presume that was difficult for you to kind of try to find your own way from that perspective.
Oh, yeah. No, it was, but in the same respect, like in some instances, I sometimes wish that they would have like pushed me in a more academic kind of direction, because I think that I had like I would be in a different place now if they had. Nonetheless, I'm very happy with where I actually did end up, and I don't think that I would have as good of a grasp on who I actually am and what I actually enjoy if they hadn't pushed me in kind of a false direction. So it really wasn't something that was like traumatizing or anything like that. It was just kind of something that I recognized later on in life.
I mean, in hearing you speak and seeing how you kind of present yourself, because you're in your early 20s, right?
Yes.
I know I'm not going to do the typical, you're not supposed to ask a girl her age, but I'll give you the ballpark. So, but yeah, you see, you strike me, as a more mature person than, some people are. Like, I look at other people who I've met, and even when I was in my early 20s, you don't think of yourself. All you are is you're kind of existing, you're just like in this fast paced motion thing, especially when you're obviously involved in like music and being creative. You don't have an opportunity to like reflect on yourself. And it sounds like you've obviously done a lot of that introspection already, which like you said, it helps you set up for knowing yourself better early on in life.
Oh, absolutely. I'm like in the psych field, and I think that's what pushed me towards it. I've always had like a metacognition about myself that has like pushed me towards it. And it's always interested me. I've always like more so myself than other people, just kind of tried to understand why I feel the way that I feel and things like that. So I would say that I have spent a decent amount of time kind of doing that introspection. You're
looking to, enter a field in which you obviously have to do that from a professional standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny because like you actually learn not to do that at all, because the intuitive answers are usually wrong. And you kind of have to learn to like distrust your own, hunches. And so it's kind of led me into this like weird conundrum of like what led me into the field, I have to now kind of like unlearn.
And so as you were growing up, and obviously as you started to, enter high school and those formative years, when did independent music in general kind of start to, percolate? And, you self-describe in other, interviews that you've done in regards to, reference yourself as a goth or maybe referencing yourself going through a goth phase. So was that kind of your first entry point as far as independent music is concerned?
Oh no, I liked metalcore. Like I was like really into like Christian metalcore.
Did you come from a religious household?
Not particularly. My dad is now very religious. But we didn't go to church or anything.
Okay, got it.
So not really. It was like an independent thing. I like still am pretty religious in a loose sense of the word. But yeah, I don't. It was a lot to do with like the people, as well as like that that drove me into the Christian metalcore.
Yeah. Well, because I think, I mean, it's funny because so many people, have such a negative opinion of that, that specific style of music. But it's like, I mean, even in my formative years, like that was still, because this is like, like late 90s. So it's like, I mean, that's when Tooth and Nail and Solid State started to absolutely explode, and it was like almost unavoidable. Yeah. But then, like, I presume a lot of the bands that, you were introed to were, Under Oath and Devil Wears Prada, and like that sort of like, second or third generation, but still just as pervasive. And, it's identifying as a kid where you're just like, okay, there's this awesome band, they're being loud and, doing this cool thing. But then there's kind of, there's an additional layer to it of like their convictions and, faith and everything else that's mixed up in it. So is that what was kind of, pulling you towards that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was part of it. I didn't really realize that a lot of the bands were Christian, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I just kind of got into them because they were all on the same label. And, like you find one, and then it kind of, back in those days, you couldn't just do an internet search. Like, right. You kind of just had to do an actual, some research. Or you ordered, I remember I would, order a CD and get one of those booklets that has, all the labels, other releases that you could order from the phone.
Sure. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's how I was actually introduced to 90s emo and stuff like that I really fell into after that was mm-hmm. because of I'm trying to remember. I have no idea what band it would have been, but it's something that you would never associate with that. And I just was flipping through the catalog, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. This sounds interesting. I'll check out Cap and Jazz. Sure. They have a weird name, and just kind of spiraled from there.
Mm-hmm. Was it introduced primarily by the people you were hanging out with at high school and stuff like that?
Kind of. There was, we didn't live in a cool place, like a hip, cool place. So there was 3 or 4 people who I was friends with there who were interested in the same thing and had a band and stuff, and they would introduce me to a couple of things. But I actually was expelled right at a little after I got interested in that type of music. Mm-hmm. And so I just didn't really have that connection with anybody from the school. It was more internet connections, I feel that I got introduced to more music from.
You were expelled your junior year?
It was my sophomore year. It was the beginning of a sophomore year, I think.
Right. And that, for anybody that can do a small amount of research, can find out about that. So I won't bother you for the story because it is pretty funny. I'm sure it was traumatic at the time.
Yeah.
Is it one of those things you look back on that time and are bummed that it played out like that because you didn't have that sort of connectivity?
I'm so happy. I am so grateful. I wrote a letter to the person who basically made me, be expelled. And I was I'm so grateful because first of all, I got a way better education because I was homeschooled, and I had teachers who were attuned to my specific needs, and they were pushing more than the regular high school curriculum. But also, I basically graduated really early and was able to start my, not adult life, but my post high school life mm-hmm. really early. And I feel that's really shaped who I am and changed my perspective. And I also was able to kind of branch out and see what other people are like people who aren't just from my school. Mm-hmm. 'Cause that's kind of you have a core group at high school, and then that's all you need. That's all that really matters. But because I didn't have that, I think, pushed way more into music because that was my friend group. That was who I hung out with, and that was the only social life that I really had because I wasn't going to a school and being corralled in with a bunch of people every day. Right, yeah. So I'm definitely really grateful. I'm really, really grateful.
At that point, you're forced to look for a primary community for you to kind of latch onto, and rather than, like you said, being I guess I'll go to prom or whatever, whatever you have to do because you're a part of high school. You hit on an important thing that I think a lot of people struggle with is the idea, when you're in high school, like there's obviously that feeling of, being trapped and like, when does my life start? And like, oh man, like there's the pull and push of like, okay, when does my life start? But at the same time, it's kind of terrifying to graduate because you're removed from your comfort zone. But the thing that that's unique about your story is the fact that I feel that people that start stuff in high school or are forced to not forced, but decide to do things differently, whether that is like, playing a band or whether that is like be expelled, like having those outside experiences helps you start early, quote unquote. Like like you said.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I got a head start. Even though, like, now I'm still in college and I'm 24, I did get a head start. I just had a couple pauses in between. But even just, like, in my, like, forming my personality and my values and things that I enjoy and don't enjoy, and, like, kind of, like we talked about earlier, getting a feel for who I am, those are all things that I dealt with because I had so much more time, and B, because I, like, was kind of forced to decide what I wanted to do with my time. Nobody was telling me what to do. It was just kind of, you have to figure it out yourself. And
so did you, as you were, started to go to shows and started to experience like that stuff, did you immediately have the notion that you wanted to, play in bands and kind of do that? Or was that something that just kind of by default started to kind of seep into your life?
Always. I was not really, I wouldn't have ever like considered myself a musician or anything like that. But I've always been like super into singing. Like I was in singing lessons when I was little, and it was something that I just wanted to do all the time. I would like put on Toni Braxton and like Celine Dion in my room and just sing along. I had like karaoke tapes that I would just sing along to. I really, really loved it. And like, I mean, I obviously still do. So that was actually what pushed me into it. It's not like I ever wanted to be like in a band or a performer or anything like that. I just like really enjoyed doing it.
Right. You
still do.
Yeah, you liked singing. You liked the actual act of it.
Yeah, like I get so mad when I'm in a car or something and somebody doesn't turn it up loud enough to sing along. I'm like, come on, why wouldn't you want to? It's so much fun. It's just something I've always wanted to do. And my dad has like videotapes of me when we were little, and I'm just like yelling in the background, I want to sing. I just
so
always
good.
wanted to do it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, that was what pushed me into it. It wasn't like I like wanted to do it, but it was just an avenue for me to do it.
And did you, kind of, backtracking for a second, but with the expulsion and all that sort of stuff, like I presume did that cause huge fraction within your household as far as like the relationship with your parents, or was that something you were able to kind of, navigate without too much strife?
No, it was really bad at the time. I'm really fortunate that my parents were able to like homeschool me, because I just would have not ever finished high school otherwise, because I was on house arrest, so I can't go to a different school. Mm-hmm. And it was really bad because my mom had cancer and my brother had cancer at the time. And so they were like going in and out of chemo, and I'm sitting there like, oh, I said something mean to my teacher, and now you have to deal with all this stuff. And like just even court dates and things like, it was really, really bad. It was traumatic for everyone involved.
It sounds, I mean, in what you're describing, that's like a million moving parts. So there's no way that wouldn't be stressful for not only yourself, but everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was more so everybody else. I was like very depressed because I couldn't talk to my friends and stuff like that, or couldn't see my friends and just whatever. Like now I look back on it and I realized that it was actually way, way, way worse for
my
parents.
It wasn't all about you, Brittany. That's kind of strange, right?
I mean, it's teenagers, man. When you're a teenager, it really is all about you. And now I look back, I feel so bad. I've made that clear.
So I presume both your mother and your brother have got through that, or are they still battling cancer?
Oh, actually, my mom passed away from cancer like 2 years ago.
Oh man.
Yeah, but she had cancer my since I can remember.
Oh,
and she
okay.
actually was very much a fighter. And then my brother is fine now. He had lymphoma, and like that's the kind of cancer that once you get rid of it, it stays away. So he's not really in any danger anymore.
So I presume that with your mother passing, you are just like acutely aware of what how devastating that disease is, and obviously everybody that surrounds you, I'm sure, knows of the tragedy that you went through yourself.
My mom was like a perfect human, I would say. Anybody who knew her would probably say that. So obviously it was really, really, really bad and difficult. But I just like when I looked at it in a positive light, and I still do, kind of that some people don't even get parents that they love, and I at least have a parent that I was like able to, mourn for and love. I don't want to be too dreary or anything, but
no, yeah, that's your statement is absolutely true.
Yeah, I feel lucky. I mean, two of my best friends are both adopted, and they had like traumatic childhood because they didn't have like a mom for a while. Part of their life they obviously found a family with their adoptive parents, but I think that's kind of framed how I look at it. Some people don't even get that. Like some people don't have a mom, so I'm really fortunate that I have one that I can miss so much.
That you can take solace and comfort in the fact that you had a relationship with her. You have these existing bonds that will never be torn apart, even through death. She's in your head. That's it. There's no one can take that away from you.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I'm growing up to you see your mother and yourself, or your father and yourself.
Yeah.
And every time I do something that would remind me of her, I'm just like, oh, there it is. I'm turning into her.
Yeah, you're like she's still she's lived on through me. And so then so as you graduated, like you said, early through your high school experience, did you immediately start trying to figure out what you wanted to do? Was like psychology part of your plan at that point, or was it once you kind of graduated and were 18 and can kind of move out, is that what you wanted to do immediately?
No, it was something that was interesting to me. I wouldn't say that it was like a plan yet. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Which was difficult because my brother was kind of like, as soon as he graduated high school, he went to college and then finished early with a 4.0 at like a really difficult school with a really difficult program, and then immediately was given an internship, and they paid for him to go to grad school and all this. Like he just was a really big success and just kind of went straight ahead. And I definitely took some time to figure out what I was doing and just like relaxed and took my, I definitely didn't know for a long time. I knew that I wanted to just do something to like make my parents proud. Kind of, everybody kind of has that feeling like, oh, I want to, like they put a lot of effort into my future. So I just kind of want to make sure that it's not a complete failure. So I went to a community college and just took a bunch of classes all over the place, and eventually took a psych class and loved it, loved my professor, and it just kind of seemed right. Then I actually had a lot of times where I was looking to change my major, change my mind, and I was just kind of like, well, I might as well go with psych because that's what I have going on right now. And it's a little, it's a good problem to have like too many options is how I kind of look at it. But I'm actually doing English as well. That even to this day, I'm having a really hard time to, like splitting what I want to do and like putting all my effort into one, because I just want to do too many different things. Yeah. So I luckily I didn't have to compromise. I just am doing as much as I want.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're those are two completely different disciplines, but cool. You have the ability to obviously explore both of those and be like, well, let's see where each of these takes me.
I'm definitely planning on going to grad school for psych, though. I'm not gonna really pursue the English, but it's a great thing to have, like knowledge-wise. Definitely, that was more of a, I have to finish some other like requirements, and I have a lot of time at school still, so I might as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
pursue that.
Sure. And so then when did playing in your first band kind of, pop up in your life? Was that obviously after high school ended?
Yes. I don't know how old I was. I probably was like 19, I would say. I think I'm really bad with like gauging how old I was when things happened or how many years ago.
Sure.
Because I still think it's 2012 for some reason. But I had one of my friends, Graham, I texted him and I was like, I really want to start a band that sounds like New Order or something. And he was like, okay, yeah, like I have a bunch of ideas, and gave me this tape that he already had. Kind of like I had, my whole life. I'm like, I want to be in a band. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And then, talking about it with people and never following through. And he kind of like forced me to follow through because we found a bassist.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, okay, so our first practice is Wednesday and you're going to be there. And I was like, okay, sounds great. And so I kind of just fell into that one.
Mm-hmm.
It was great.
Was that Procession?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are the only two that have ever done anything notable or anything.
Right. I presume you played your first show with that?
Yeah, that was my first show.
Right. Because you strike me too as the type of person where there are people who it's like obviously like kind of enjoy being the center of attention, enjoy being in the spotlight, and there are people who I like to call like reluctant front man, and you strike me as a person who's like, I like playing in a band, but I really hate getting in front of people and doing it. Am I correct in that assumption?
Absolutely. Yes. And I actually, I've always wanted to be a singer of some sort. I actually started playing guitar so that I could have something to do with my hands while I'm on stage and singing, because otherwise I would just feel too uncomfortable to even do it.
Right.
So it's been a barrier to me.
Yeah, no, I love that because there's definitely people. I used to sing in all the bands I played in, and there definitely is that element of like, if I ever dicked around on like my guitarist's guitar, there was that feeling of just like, oh, this kind of does feel like a shield in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. I
love nice.
I love that you were like, out of sheer necessity, I am going to play guitar.
I learned how to play guitar in literally 2 months before our first show. I was like, I think I'm going to play guitar in this band. And then I was going to play keyboard at first, and I'm terrible at it. So I was like, well, I guess I'll try guitar. I've always wanted to. And I had learned covers and things like that, but I'd never played in a band or anything, done anything with other people.
Right.
So I just kind of picked it up, and I was like, otherwise I'm going to feel really uncomfortable. So I kind of forced myself to just learn it. And it was actually the first show was horrible for I'm sure, because of that. But eventually it got better.
Sure. Yeah. You got a little more comfortable up there. I mean, I don't know why it's always funny when you play in your first band or whatever, you always feel like it's such a good idea to film your first show. And it's like, nothing could, it's such a terrible idea. Just don't do that.
It is a terrible idea. It's so, I still am really, really uncomfortable and need the guitar, and I only will do stuff from the side of the stage. It's funny because Brendan is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us want to be in the middle. We're fighting for who can be farthest to the side. And
you're like, can we go ahead and put the drums up front and we'll just go ahead and be behind him?
Exactly. That's basically, that would be our ideal situation, but unfortunately that doesn't happen.
Yeah. People may find that stage setup a little strange.
Yeah.
I have to bring it up just because it's something that I found interesting where it's like, I've done 100 some odd episodes of this show, and it's like, you are literally my a third female that I've had on. And so, it's it's painfully obvious, but obviously, independent music in general, whether you talk about punk, hardcore, indie rock, whatever, it's, completely male dominated. How has that navigated in your own head in regards to once you first started to go to shows and are like, hey, so I'm kind of one of the only females here. How's your journey been with that? Because it's something that it has to wear on you, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's definitely.
I know it's a very large question. I apologize, but I guess maybe a good way to start it off is when you first started to realize that it's like, oh wow, I am not only am I going to, a hardcore show, which is a minority of a minority as far as, music is concerned, but then add an additional layer, like I am one of only 5 girls at the show. Like, when did you first start to notice that?
Well, as I said, I've always kind of gravitated towards things that or like been friends with boys, like, my best friend growing up was a boy, and my brother, was also my best friend. So I'm used to being one of the only girls, or I was at the time, used to being like one of the only girls in a situation. So that didn't strike me really, at least not too obviously. Like I like noticed it, but it didn't really affect me too much, I don't think. I also had like one girlfriend who would always be with me. Like we would go to shows together. And I think that kind of like, I didn't ever feel like completely alone or anything like that because of it.
I've noticed in, my years of going to shows where it's like, you definitely always find, girls bonding together for obvious reasons because of the, the aggressive nature in the music, and just like the fact that like, we like to go to shows, but we also like to be in a community as well. Not just like you said, the only girl in the room where it's kind of like, oh, what's she doing here? And then I'm sure as you started to go to shows and start to become more involved in music in general, and the quote unquote scene, so to speak, the judgments that get placed on girls in general, as far as like, oh, she's here to obviously make out with band dudes, and like, start to,
oh yeah,
that starts to play into it as well. How have you tried to, I guess, gracefully navigate that without, falling into the stereotypical tradition of just like a girl that obviously is trying to make out with band dudes?
Right. I'm really lucky because in Grand Rapids, where I like really honed that whole scene or whatever, I was like really into it. There were more girls in the scene than there were guys.
Wow.
I don't know really why, but I mean, almost every show that I would go to, there was multiple female members in every band, and I don't know what was unique about it. I'm very lucky that I grew up in that, or like came up in that, environment. I noticed it a lot more in like hardcore shows, obviously, but this was like more of like a punk kind of community in Grand Rapids. I definitely do notice it more like on this side of the state, because the opposing sides, there's more, it's definitely male dominated. It's like 100% male dominated. It's not too much of an issue, because by the time I had moved here, first of all, people at least like somewhat respected me as a human being, because I'd like known them through like doing shows for them or whatever. Like it's not like I was just like a new face to a lot of the people in the more male dominated scene. There's definitely been a number of times that I've come across the like just general disrespect or stereotyping, but for the most part, like the people who do that are I just want to tread carefully. The people who do that like don't really matter.
Sure.
Like, the people who do that are just shitheads.
Yeah. No, I'll fill in the words for you, where it's like the notion that it's like people that do have that sort of attitude are usually quickly weeded out, where it's like, okay.
Yeah. Nobody really, I mean, they don't stick around. The people who I'm like good friends with are too smart to fall into that kind of stereotyping, and they already know who I am anyway. So
yeah, I
think also just like having it's kind of sad, because I do think that like kind of having their friendship validates my existence as within the scene or whatever, because they're respectable people.
I think there's a notion too, like the idea that you probably, relatively speaking, you probably had to work harder to quote unquote build your credibility simply because of you being a female. Like you had to work, you had to book whatever, using a shoddy example, but it's like, you had to book 15 shows before people are like, oh, yo, Brittany's like, she's on the level. Like she's not one of those girls, quote unquote. And then a guy has to book 2 shows and they're like, oh yeah, that dude's cool. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I'm super lucky that I came up in Grand Rapids, and they didn't have that attitude as much. I mean, there's definitely like a couple people who did, but I can't even remember like booking my first show or it being a thing, because it was people there were just very accepting and kind of wanted people to get interested and invested. Mm-hmm. So they were more excited than like trying to figure out who the poser is. Like they just didn't care about that. So I luckily didn't really have to deal with it as much as I know that a lot of other people do.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome that you got to have a more, for lack of a better term, like natural experience, a gender neutral experience, as it were, rather than, a highly charged atmosphere of when I was going to show, well, not was like I'm retired, but when I was going to shows, in the 90s, when I first started to kind of witness, this is like 97, 98. And it was definitely one of those things where, being in Southern California, that's when, hardcore, and more specifically metalcore, started to just really rise. And it was definitely one of those things where it's like you just saw the influx of girls that were just interested in being a part of this as a way to meet dudes. And it was just like it was so apparent that it was difficult for the girls that I was friends with, who I knew, like yourself, had, lack of a better term, built credibility, that they're like, they're on the level. Like they're not, they may date a guy in a band, but that doesn't necessarily make them one of those girls, So it was
right.
It's cool that you, like I said, you got to have more of a natural experience rather than being kind of, thrown to the wolves, and, sometimes that being a very negative experience.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I'm very fortunate because I now look back on it with like a lot of fondness. Yeah. And I don't have to look back on it and think like, oh man, those people were bullying me or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Something I also find interesting, especially with, the music that you guys are creating with Pity Sex, is the fact that, are most of the people that you play with in Pity Sex like in their early 20s?
Yeah, I'm the youngest. Brandon's, I think, 26.
Okay.
Sean is 25, and Brennan is my age, but he's a little older.
Sure. The notion that it's like, for all intent and purposes, you guys are making, more mature music for your age bracket. Because, a lot of people, especially when you see it's like, more so in the early 20s, where you're just kind of, you're creating basic music, like late teens, early 20s, you're just trying to figure out how to even like create a song in general. And so it's interesting when you're, you guys are being able to create, nuance and atmosphere and stuff that is more, fleshed out the older you get. Do you notice people like being able to not really either maybe immediately identify with you guys because of the fact that it's like, oh wow, like this is more, mature music, but you are playing in front of a predominantly younger audience? Like, how is that kind of, have you noticed any sort of friction from that, or are kids generally being like, oh, I immediately get where you're coming from?
I honestly think that kids immediately get it. I think it's hard to say, because I don't think that, I certainly don't look at it as something I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like sit down and make, really make this complex or anything. And a lot of our like, my favorite parts are like super simple too. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I don't really think it's never been brought up as an issue. I've never noticed it.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's good, because I think too, just because of the accessibility of music, kids are able to, have a really, really wide musical palette where it's like, I like Joy Division, and I also really, really like Day to Remember. And it's like those, mm-hmm. Those things couldn't be farther apart sonically. You at least have, like I said, a palette in which to understand where bands are coming from. So it's cool that you guys are seeing the positive, attributes of that, whether that, the iPod generation, as it were, where it's like kids don't listen to records, they just listen to songs. So it's good. Mm-hmm. It's good that they immediately get you guys, as opposed to like, oh yeah, what is that weird dark stuff that they're doing over there?
Yeah. I'm sure that somebody, met a lot of, like people out there would listen to it and say, what? But, or just like that hate it or whatever. But I'm just glad that like a couple people like it.
Right. And then, kind of to, hit on a last point, the fact that it seems to me that it's like you're obviously balancing playing in a band and pursuing your schoolwork and stuff like that, where I think that there's such a distinct pressure for people that play in bands to kind of be so singularly focused on one aspect of their life and not be able to really explore anything else. Like, do you see that not only around you, but are you grateful for the position that you're kind of in to be able to kind of do a little bit of both, so to speak?
Yeah, well, like, I see that at school, too. I see it in the people that I go to school with. And they're all a little bit younger than me and have, like, they all kind of, I didn't go straight to a university where they, like, pushed you into a career path or something like that. So I have a completely different notion of what I'm doing at school. That can work for some people. It definitely would never work for me because I enjoy both aspects so much. I think they inform each other. They can't necessarily be discrete. I mean, some of the lyrics that I've written started out as, like, English projects. I bring, like, I don't know, things from the music world into things that I do in school as well. And I'm really, really happy that I have the ability and that the rest of my bandmates are, like, respectful of what I want to do in school, because it's definitely posed problems for us. Like, there's been huge opportunities that we've had to turn down because of me being in school, but they are thankfully really understanding and respectful that it's important to me. And I still think, like, I don't think that anything that I would do would be as fruitful if I didn't have the other. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. No, I totally, I get that, because I think that there's such, I mean, there's such, like I said, such importance placed on, especially from a band perspective of, like, okay, you have to tour 300 days out of the year in order to, like, really quote unquote make it. And then for, you and your bandmates to make the distinct decision where it's like, we can do stuff during these time frames, and they can coexist. And the quality, if there wasn't, if you didn't have school, the quality of what you're doing musically could be potentially diminished because of the lack of it being there. So I totally, I don't think a lot of people view it that way, but I think that there's validity in that, because like you said, you're not just so focused on this one thing, and you don't have, you can't look at any other influence bearing down on it besides, just the people I've just toured with and the records I'm currently listening to.
Mm-hmm. I do feel like I have, like, a different perspective than a lot of people who are, like, making it a career. None of us in Pity Sex ever intended to even do anything within the realm of what we've done so far. It was kind of just, like, a fun thing that we did. Never really even expected to, like, record a full length or anything like that. That wasn't within our scope. So we just kind of look at it as, like, wow, we're here, so we might as well keep on going. And luckily, I've been able to continue. If I had to choose between the two, I don't think that I could choose between the two. I'd probably have to choose school, because I just feel like, I would be really letting my dad down if I didn't. But I really, I just think that I wish that more people, especially young people, viewed them as not as mutually exclusive. I wish that more people saw that you could do both, and you can be both artsy and smart or whatever, or, like, intellectual, and that they can coexist and inform each other.
It's funny. I have to mention it because you've brought up on more than one occasion the the idea of obviously making your parents proud. Like, that in and of itself is a very common feeling, but I don't think that the sentiment is prevalent as I guess it once was. Like, I honestly, I can't recall the last time a person's actually physically said those words to me like you just did. And so is it something that you you're doing just based out of respect and love, or is it that sort of, like, external pressure that's put on you, by him at this point?
Oh, it's definitely respect and love, like 100%. I think that my parents would have been thrilled if I was a starving artist or if I was a brain surgeon. Like, since I was little, just have always said, do what makes you happy. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about, like, things, whatever. Do what you love to do. And they've always pushed me towards that. They've always been super supportive. And if I ever had some crazy desire to pursue something that, whatever, they would 100% back me up in that. They've always backed me up with music. It's definitely respect and love, but I also just, like, I feel like you put so much effort into me. You know, I look back on it now and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't even imagine putting that much effort into something and then just having it, like, fail or, do you know what I mean? Like, or not be as successful as it could have been.
Or on the flip side, just actually be appreciative. Because I think that's I think that's probably the key point. Like, I mean, I have an almost 3-year-old child, and it's like, it's one of those, it's one of those things where I look at it, especially in the context of what I've been raised, which is, not too dissimilar from your experience. The notion of my kid being able to, basically do whatever the hell he wants under the context of the fact that, like, I will support it, and I will, as long as I remotely understand it, I'll be happy for him and he can pursue that, as long as there's that level of, like, which it sounds like you've arrived at. It's like that respect, where it's like, you put time into me. Like, I love you and I appreciate that from you. And sometimes it takes people, to be on their deathbed before they realize that, like, their parents did stuff for me.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, my parents did, like, way above and beyond what I feel like the average parent does. So I might have arrived at that early because I just, like, had that unique experience. But yeah, I feel like it's a little underappreciated sometimes. Some people don't realize how much their parents do until it's a little bit too late.
Right. Or just the notion too, where it's like saying you actually love your parents, or, like, actually making an effort to hang out with your parents. It's like, I'll honestly never identify or understand people that, like, see their parents, like, twice a year, like, and really hold no effort to, like, hang out with them. Like, be like, oh, I'm gonna go see my parents this weekend or whatever. And it's like, that's just such a, it sounds like for you too, or it's like, it's such an ingrained thing of what I do. It's like, I don't understand that.
It sounds like you're also very lucky and have had parents that you can do that with. It's just,
yeah,
I enjoy it. I love my family and I feel really lucky, and I know that a lot of people don't have that, and I'm going to enjoy it while I can and make sure that they know that I appreciate it, because I know that I was given, like, kind of a rare upbringing, because I do feel like my parents went, above and beyond. But I feel like I would be failing them to not give them, like, the type of, like, love and devotion that they gave me.
Sure.
But that being said, like, I would do it anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it sounds like too, you've obviously been able to foster a very positive attitude about, like, not only your relationship with him, but, life in general. And I think that, it's easy, especially in the context of independent music, to, dwell on the negative and dwell in the dark. And while it's awesome to enjoy art that is created from that place, it's nice to be able to be like, no, like, I'm positive and I like life. Like, this is good.
Yeah. I mean, I have definitely, not recently, but like, within the past couple of years, kind of, like, taken a turn philosophically, I guess, towards that ideology, just from realizing that it's, everybody thinks that an artist or whatever creative person has to be bummed out all the time and depressed, and it actually makes, neurologically, it makes you less creative and less interesting. So I have taken a turn to think, like, okay, I can actually be happy. I can write about happy things, and people can come to that and appreciate that. And how much better is it to appreciate something that's positive than it is to appreciate something that's, it's fine. I'm not devaluing, like, art that comes from that perspective. I've definitely been there, but I think it's cool to be able to appreciate it from both aspects.
Yeah. Well, and I also too, it's like some of the the most, whatever, hate-filled negative lyrics that I've ever heard, if I ever have the opportunity to actually like meet and know the people that have created that, are usually the nicest, most positive people in general, where you're just like, it's such a juxtaposition, but you do feel like, I think you hit on the point, or you hit the nail on the head exactly, where, when you dwell on the negative too long, completely de-incentivizes any reason for you to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it depresses your brain, literally.
By far the most, in-depth philosophical discussion, and I felt like we've been able to keep up with one another, so good job.
Oh, thank you.
So there you have it. That was Brittany. Cool, right? Down to earth, very thoughtful, very insightful, very deep. Not to say that I wasn't expecting that, but anytime I'm able to engage with a person on that level and talk about philosophical issues, spiritual issues, the big life stuff, I love to engage like that. And it was just awesome that Brittany, not only would I feel she was able to keep up with me, but completely surpass me as well and be like, okay, she has a good head on her shoulders. So yeah, check out her band, Pity Sex. It's great. And they'll be on tour whenever they feel like it, obviously, as you listen to the interview. So yeah, like I said, go visit the Patreon page. I'm going to be pumping this for a good month or so, and then I'll kind of let it quietly fade in the background. And then a few months later, I'll kind of be like, hey, check it out again. So for those of you that check out the show on a weekly basis, bear with me. You'll see the ebbs and flows of it. But I want to get it out there. I want to spread the word. I want to make this show as awesome as possible for you, because ultimately that's the reason why I do it. It's selfish because I like to do it, but then also as a byproduct, if you enjoy it, that's even better. Anyway, so patreon.com/xpurposex. The producer of the show, as always, is Tom Richfield. I want to get that guy paid. Let's visit that Patreon page. And then on the show, the upcoming guests. Next week is Matt Miller, a professional photographer, and he's also a member of Most Precious Blood, and he's been an active member in the hardcore community, especially from a live photography standpoint as well. And after that, we have Rob Moran from Unbroken, Over My Dead Body, and currently Narrows. And that's all. That's all I'm going to tease. There'll be some more people, but I just don't want to blow my load, so to speak, even though that's pretty gross, but you get the point. Anyways, until next week, thank you so much, everybody, and be safe.